Great skills again by him. Oh, marvellous goal by Logan.
Welcome to the Rangers Journey.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Rangers Journal. My name is Scotty, and I'm your host for this evening. So, right, let's get into it. Last week, Jamie O'Hara came out with a statement that Stockport County would win the SPFL, and apparently Scottish football's a disaster. Well, he's at it. That's a problem, innit? Lazy English snobbery that's been hanging over a game for years. A league where every Premier League clubs get handed over £100 million for their TV deals before a ball's even kicked. But somehow we're the ones judged on an uneven playing field. Tonight, we're going to tackle it head on. The misconceptions, the disrespect, the real reason Scottish football gets written off by people who barely watch it. Before we get into it properly, let's have a wee look at this.
You can't get away from the facts that you're the 39th league, you know, in the world, which is pretty shocking, and you're trying to say that you're a massive... Look, Celtic are a big club. Of course they are. I'm not saying that they're not. But I look at it and go, like this season, Stockport County are top. They're top of League One. Stockport County... Are you
saying that they would win the Scottish
They would go and win the Scottish Premier League this
Nonsense.
season.
Nonsense.
They would. They would go and win.
Nonsense.
They'd win your league.
Right. Now that you've heard that nonsense for yourself, let's break it down. And to dig into this with me tonight, I'm joined by a strong panel. First up, Mitch, a man who watches more football in a week than Jamie O'Hara has in a decade. Calm when he wants to be, feral when he needs to be, and absolutely primed for this one. Next, we've got Craig Fabanger, travelling across borders just to tell England they're wrong again. And finally, Stevie, the only guy I know who can go from measured analysis to full conspiracy theorist in the comment section under 10 seconds. Perfect for a topic like this. Let's get into it, lads. Mitch, how you doing, pal?
All the better for seeing you boys, and I'm ready to start turning into the man maybe with a bit more chins than I've got, and that takes some doing.
Craig, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very good, Scotty. Obviously a subject a bit more dear to my heart in the sense of being stranded down here, so I can maybe give another perspective on this. Although I don't think I'll be agreeing with Jamie O'Hara.
Aye, definitely, mate. I know. Stevie, how are you, mate?
Evening, lads. Yeah, I'm very good, thanks. Let's go in two-footed on Jamie O'Hara.
Aye, let's do it. So, first, Craig, I'm going to come to you on this, right? Obviously, I met you last year when I was down staying with Ross. Me and you were English teams Leeds. We're first teams Rangers.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the level between the Scottish Championship, the English Championship, and the league that Rangers play in? What's the difference in the levels?
I think if you take it and stretch it out from end to end, there probably isn't a huge amount. It's where you get to the top and to the bottom. And it's a very skewed league as well, in the sense that every year you have three teams coming down with 50 million quid in their back pockets, you know. And so over the last few years, what used to be a bit of a grind in an open league had become a bit of a sort of yo-yo for the teams who'd gone up and then come back down. And so if you take it in isolation, those 3 to 4 teams that have been around it, there's actually not a massive amount of difference. The only thing is that there's no team in the Championship that can get as big a crowd or has as global or as worldwide a support as the 2 top teams in Scotland. And that is, you know, a fact. But as you go down the league, then you're getting down to your sort of Livingstons, your St Mirrens, whatever. Is there really that much of a difference between them and... Well, I mean, at the bottom of the Championship at the minute, you've got Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday, Norwich, all teams who have been in the Premiership for a while. So I think the important thing here is that I don't believe any of those Championship clubs, outside maybe the top 1 or 2 in an exceptional year, can compete with the top 2 teams in Scotland. But there may be clubs down the pecking order that could compete in the SPFL and finish potentially mid-table, shall we say?
Fair point. Fair point. Mitch, what's your take on the whole sort of topic? The whole Jamie O'Hara saying that Stockport County would win our league.
I'm just going to go in two-footed, mate. Like, honestly, it's a topic that's genuinely has riled me up for the better part of a few days since the interview. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form a fan of, the one for that lot that was on the interview with him. But you talk about how Sky stitched him up as a pundit, and let's call a spade a spade. He was completely stitched up by Sky, and that kind of shows you what our broadcast partner thinks of the league to allow a pundit and a presenter to speak to fan media of one of their leagues that they distribute. How do you let a presenter speak to a guest like that on your show? Because I'm sorry, but that's a league that, yes, we don't get paid huge money for Sky. It's about £6 million a year. I think roughly the top 3 clubs get about £2 million a year, roughly, from the Sky deal up here.
Mm-hmm.
And most League One clubs down in England are getting about £2 million each out the deal down there. So Sky money is comparable. But I think genuinely the level of disrespect that Sky allowed a guest to take part in, to feel as a guest on the show, I think that's genuinely, there's not even been an apology from Sky for how he was treated. And again, I'm no fan of the gentleman in question. Well, we'll call him a gentleman in question. I'm no fan of him in question, but to allow a Sky broadcaster and presenter to speak to a guest like that, that's reprehensible, as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely, mate. Definitely. Stevie, what's your thoughts on the whole thing?
Just really quickly, Mitch made a great point there. I much preferred the Scottish football coverage when it was BT, obviously TNT now, but BT really invested in the coverage. They also seemed to really care about presenting a good show. Sky are not the same, nowhere near good enough. But I mean, O'Hara's just, to me, he's an irrelevance. It's just, he's come away with that, and it's just utter nonsense. One point I would make: how many players for the Championship go to Serie A? Look at the amount of Scottish boys in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years that have went to Italy and done really well. Not just went, I mean, they've really impressed. There's no players for the Championship doing that, not to my knowledge anyway. So the fact that clubs from abroad are cherry picking our best young talent, that tells you the league is improving. I know we've got our critics, but there's still a lot of quality there. I think what Craig was touching on there, saying the difference between the top and the bottom, there probably is a bit more strength and depth, because essentially the Championship to me has become like the Premier League 2 down there. There's so much money. They can really attract top players, top managers, even look at the amount of foreign managers that are in the Championship. That's a kind of telling thing. So yeah, I think O'Hara's just a complete, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but he's not really got a point there. There's too much proof, too much evidence that disproves his point. He's just, as you've said, very arrogant. But that's his whole thing. He was a very average football player, and he's a worse pundit.
Fair. Mitch, I'm going to come to you with this point, right? So, the product's so poor, no broadcaster would offer decent money. I'll leave that at Neil Doncaster's door. I don't believe our game's amazing, but I believe it's better than the current TV deal that we've got.
I'm not going to lie, mate. That comment in its own is genuinely quite offensive. To everybody up here in Scottish football that's involved in it. I don't know whether or not the person involved with that is somebody who is Scottish-based, English-based or not, but tell me you don't watch an awful lot of Scottish football outside the Rangers games without saying that you don't watch an awful lot of Scottish football games outside the Rangers games. Because there's been some absolute barnbuster games. You look at the Dundee Derby games, they've been pretty tidy. The most recent Edinburgh Derby games, again, they've been tidy games. There's Motherwell versus Livy just a couple of weeks ago. Game that at one point Livy Motherwell were 3-0 or 2-0 down at half time. Came back, the game ended up finishing 3-2. That way, tell me, nobody can tell me that this. You can look at the politics and you can take all the granular stuff that none of us can control over it. Doncaster is somebody who's been he typifies a man that's been in a job for far too long and is no longer fit for purpose. Mm-hmm. If you want to if you look at the two broadcast partners we've got Premier who pick up obviously the odd game here and there. Now they pick up the scraps that Sky don't want. Stevie touched on it earlier. Premier treat the SPFL as a professional league. Sky treat the SPFL as a diddy league that they just got as part of a package for British football. And
It's why they want fun.
they wanted those fun games because basically they didn't want anyone else to have it. And it's much like everything else in life, and what Sky and the rest of them need to remember is, yes, we agreed this deal, I think, what was it, 2 years ago, roughly, this deal was agreed to, maybe 3. There's much more option in the marketplace now. You've got Netflix as an option, you've got Amazon as an option, you've even got the subsidiaries of them, like Paramount Plus and stuff, There's much more options in the world of streaming available, and the SPFL, if Neil Doncaster and the powers that be have got a set between their legs, they turn around and say, we want proper money, and if you're not going to give us it, someone else will give us it. But I do think, obviously, from an attractiveness point of view and getting a better TV deal, which obviously brings the league on a par, even with the likes of the Dutch leagues. The Dutch teams are getting something like 5 times more revenue from their TV deal than what Scottish clubs are, for a league that is comparatively the same size and probably similar quality, I would have said, probably, to the SPFL. It just shows you how poor that the TV deal is, and obviously how big an impact that makes on the quality of players that clubs can bring in, especially in the current market.
Craig, obviously you get Ellen Road quite a lot, and you've seen a lot of Championship football in the last few years. Do you think that SPFL clubs should be entitled to, say, 10 million each a season? Is that from a TV deal? Is that a hard ask?
No, I don't think it is at all. I think the problem that there is, and this all roads lead back to Neil Doncaster, is that in accepting that deal, he set a value to a certain extent, and you're going to be up against negotiators when somebody sets a new one. And although we might get more from other broadcasters, unfortunately, you start from a position of weakness in terms of how much you can actually get a hold of out of this, because, when you took that, we can give you that plus this, but we're not giving you 5 times it or 10 times it, because why should we? And, that's not the fault of the clubs or the fault of the product. It's the fault of the people who did the deal in the first place.
Stevie, no, sorry, Craig, finish.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine.
Stevie, what's your views on it? Do you think 10 million per club's a hard ask? Do you think that should be bare minimum?
I mean, in an ideal world, mate, yeah, that would be perfect. I mean,
look at what you get for winning the league up here. Is it not about £4 million or something for winning the league?
Mitch already stole my point saying about League One in England. They get more TV money than what we get. And granted, they don't get the European revenue. But yeah, it's just, again, it's mere failure for the people that run our game. I mean, we bang on about the referees and the VAR and Molly Cobb and this and that, but Neil Doncaster, he's part of the same problem. He's not part of the solution. He's the problem. We need far better leadership. And the fact that he's got that 2-year notice period, again, it's just like, come on, it's jobs for the boys. It's nowhere near good enough. The only thing I would say, another thing that goes against us, is the English pyramid of the Football League. It's so vast. But, they've got the population to support it. Whereas in Scotland, I think we've got too many clubs for the population. I don't think we can sustain success and development, and I think that's a real... I mean, obviously, you can't just do away with clubs, because obviously, your local team, whoever, you love that club. But you compare it to England, they've got the population to support it. We don't. I'm not defending O'Hara here, right? But I watched the first game of the season when we were away to Motherwell. I watched the Cardiff game, and then I watched the Rangers game, and I was watching that thinking Cardiff are a better football team than Rangers. But obviously that was Terry Vegetable's Rangers team. I think it's a different story now.
Fair enough. Stevie, what do you think of that slide? Stockport, £2 million. Rangers 26.4, Celtic 13.3, Hearts 2.6 million. Stockport's the best team in Scotland if they're here.
Absolutely not. No, they wouldn't be. Maybe make an argument for the top 6. I can't say I've watched them. In fact, they're top league. They're obviously having a very good season, so I don't want to disrespect them. Aye. And we all know that English football is incredibly competitive. You need to be organised. You need to be really determined. So they're obviously a decent setup. And I wish them all the best. But if they were playing in the Scottish Premiership, which I'd add, Jamie O'Hara doesn't even know the name of the league. He wasn't even getting the name right. That's how much he knows. So no, I think maybe fighting for top 6, but no, they wouldn't be top of the league, not at all.
Mitch, what's your thoughts on that slide? What's your thoughts on the statement that Stockport would win the SPFL? They would beat these 3 teams to win our league. They would walk it up here.
So I'm not going to swear so we don't get clipped. So we'll just get that out the way first, Scotty, so you can calm down just in case you have a wee heart attack.
No, not at all. Not at all, mate.
I think Stockport, on a genuine level, I think they would be in that top 5 up here. And that's based purely on spend and the overall quality that they've got. I think quality-wise, they are probably better than half of the SPFL. And then you take into account, there's normally one team in the top half that has an absolute shannery a back half of the season. So you'd probably say, right, top 5, top 6, they probably do it quite easy. Stevie mentioned that there. But you also then look at the players, just on a player-for-player level. And I'll use Hearts as a fairer comparison because there's no point in looking at either side of the divide when you look at the players, because it's clear that obviously the Old Firm have got far more money than Stockport, so comparing apples with oranges at that point.
Yep.
You look at the players that Hearts have signed, there's names on there that you recognise. They might not be huge household names, but there's names on there, obviously, the likes of, Cabaganu, for example, when he came in, not even taking a bash at the boy with a K. But they were known players of this kind of quality in our marketplace. You look at who Stockport have signed and you look at that and go, maybe with the exception of O'Keefe, maybe Lowe, there's not an awful lot of players on that squad there that came in there that you'd go, I definitely know this wee guy from somewhere. Whereas you look at, who Hearts brought in, Stuart Finlay, as I say, they've brought Cabanu in there over from Germany, and I'm absolutely butchering that boy's surname. The boy, Casadias, is it Casadias? Somebody can correct that.
Casadias.
Aye, again, promising talent from elsewhere. Now, wouldn't have been on the radar of Premier League teams, but he probably would have been in the radar of lower end Championship teams. Those that follow a kind of similar type of Moneyball idea that Hearts use when it comes to signings. But there's not, when you look at the quality gap between the two, even when you look at the two keepers, when you look at O'Keefe versus, Shawololo, or whatever we're calling him, the Hearts keeper that, that turned into a worldie when we played him.
Aye.
They're players that Hearts have signed, players that are suitable for the league that they're in. If Hearts and Stockport played a game tomorrow, I reckon Hearts beat them, and I reckon Hearts beat them probably 2-0.
Fair enough. Craig, you've got probably a better insight into the level comparison. What's your take on the kind of the spend and the idea that Stockport would do well up in Scotland?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to get your head around is that this is possibly the greatest Stockport team of all time, occupying the position that they're in and being on the verge of making the championship. There's a long way to go in that league, and it's no guarantee they'll even be there at the end. I think what Jamie O'Hara's done is he's picked the form team at the minute, but last season they had an outstanding team in that league in Birmingham because they'd actually spent a whole lot of money, and the spend was probably comparable to what even Rangers and Celtic can do. But this Stockport team, they're going well. Fair play to them. And that's impressive. But we're used to playing teams at a much, much bigger level in this and competing against them. Not so much this year. And look at the players we've brought in. We're in that situation now that in 7 or 8 weeks, Danny Rowe could have actually turned these players into the value that we thought we were getting. But at the minute, we've got no idea after the Russell Martin period as to whether or not we've completely and utterly wasted money on all of them, or whether or not half of them are good, or whether or not they're all decent players that actually, given a chance, could do it. But I suspect as the season goes on, I think the gap between what we see Stockport at the moment and what Rangers and Celtic are, I think will get just bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of us pulling away from them. Hearts, I still think, would be a better side than them, because I think as the season goes on as well, they'll be stuck in a grind. And those extra 8 games that teams play in that league are a grind. It's competitive because a lot of teams lose a lot of games in that league because there's just so many matches to play. So in that sense, I just don't see Stockport as viable competition. And I think Mitch was being generous in terms of top half of the SPFL, even in the form that they're on at the minute.
No, that's fair
Can I
enough.
come back really quickly?
Of course you can, Stevie.
Just thinking, obviously, Craig mentioned Birmingham there. Look at Dill and Davies. They had a cracking 6 months or year there last year on loan. They come back to Rangers and they look absolutely dreadful. So how are they, excelling at that level, but then at Rangers, mince? Do you know what I mean? And look at those 3 Scottish teams there. They've all got international players. Internationals, not League One players. So it's not even a debate.
You also even look at some of the players that left Scotland to go down to Birmingham, for example. You look at that lad, the midfielder boy that left Celtic, went off to Birmingham. He barely kicked the ball up here properly, couldn't get in that Celtic team. Walked into Birmingham when they were down in League One, and he's still a mainstay in their team now.
Yeah. And go the other way, look at like Joey Barton. Couldn't cut it up here. There's so many players that can't cut it in Scotland that have really decent careers, in the Championship, even the Premier League in England. So, yeah, I get it. It's obviously kind of skewed with Old Firm, with Rangers and Celtic. But, yeah, I think it's pretty clear the debate we're running this one.
Aye, definitely. I'm just looking at populations just now, right? So the amount of people that stay in England, you've got approximately 57.1 million, and we've got 5.49 million here in Scotland. So naturally, that tells you about the size of the countries to begin with. And I think, while I'm not a big international football fan, fair play and congratulations to Scotland for what they achieved last night, because I think it's put on some. It's raised eyebrows down south again. I think it's fair to say TalkSport is the most cringiest. See Jim White and Simon Jordan. I like Simon Jordan. I genuinely do. I like listening to him. But see listening to him speaking about Scotland and Scottish football, it's the cringiest stuff ever. And the way Jim White tries to play up to it is even worse, to be honest with you. It's no entertainment. It's not even as good as a pantomime. It's just horrendous, man.
I think that's so common though, mate. Like even like when we were going through our trouble, see whenever like they reported on Rangers, they weren't even scratching the surface. You listen to me, you're thinking, where are you getting information from? It's so inaccurate. And there's other clubs in England like Charlton and Coventry, they were kind of going through a bad time. And whenever they reported on that, I was thinking, are we getting the real story here? So I agree. I think everything they do in Scottish football is just so barely scratching the surface. You can't trust what they say.
I think for me, one of the biggest issues, and it boils back down to, and Craig's probably better placed to, either refute or ironclad my comment. I think there's always been this English snobbery when it comes to Scottish football, where we're almost like the snottery three-headed idiot up the road that either watch an SPFL game if it's on before a Super Sunday game, for example. They'll watch it just because it's on for the sake of watching it. But none of them, there's a certain level of English arrogance, I think, where they go, aye, every team in England could dog walk a team in Scotland, and you're like, come up here and try it. Come up here and give it a bash. Like, our league's crying out for a couple of extra teams. Stevie can house he can house a game in the back garden at the moment, it's fine. But I do genuinely think it does come down to the way the English media, particularly over the last 2 decades, have spoke about Scottish football as we're almost like the ugly stepsister that nobody wants to winch. That way. And I think that's what it boils down to. It's just, it's no right.
Aye, definitely.
I thought you were calling me out there at first and then realised what you were doing.
No. One thing I've always thought about is, like, see if you've done away, like every second season, if you'd done away with the League Cups in England and Scotland, and you get like a British Cup, and you had like, I don't know how you would structure it, right, with Champions League and European football and all this, because all the big clubs complain about the amount of games they've got to play. So I don't know if you'd make it like a group phase format or what, but I've banned Blue Electric, by the way, because there's 2 people on his ID, and I think I got the second one. So just for clarity in the comments, my ID got hacked on Hands Across the Water on Monday night, so I know what he's going through. But anyway, I just want to run that idea past you because I think, think back to Aberdeen going away to Burnley in the Europa League. Lewis Ferguson scores an overhead kick. McInnes was in charge of Aberdeen at the time. Aberdeen ran them close. Think back to 2012 when Templeton scores for Hearts at Anfield. They get beat 2-1 again. Brendan Rodgers in charge of Liverpool that night, and Suarez and Gerrard had to dig them out a hole that night. Like, it is there. Do you know what I mean? I do believe. Imagine Motherwell going to Old Trafford, like Falkirk playing at home to Arsenal, like these type of ties, and imagine an upset in it. Like, genuinely imagine an upset in it, or just a Brentford or something. Like, Craig, how do you think that would land? Do you think that's something that could help bridge this gap in terms of what would the revenue? Like, what's your thoughts on it?
An Anglo-Scottish Cup, essentially, something that brought. I think there'd be an appetite for certainly getting Rangers into that. Probably Celtic as well. Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen. You know, because they're names that are kind of well known down there. And I suppose if the extra thing was to bring in the other clubs with it, then I think they would do it. But I think the excitement of that possibility of those games under lights during the week and stuff could be very, very attractive to a lot of English clubs. I mean, we played some very successful pre-season friendlies against English clubs over the last 6 or 7 years. And, you know, down here there was Derby, there was Sheffield Wednesday. And fans of both those clubs still talk about those games. Stuart McCall's testimonial at Bradford. They loved it. They absolutely loved it, the home fans. Even having their ground overtaken by the fact that there were 2/3 of the ground was away fans. It was, you know, it was an event. It was worth seeing, and they enjoyed it. So I definitely think there could be something there. I also think, as Mitch said, there is that snobbery. There definitely is. And it's bridging that. But a lot of that is just the sort of bravado that you get from football fans anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's like, my league's better than your league, my team's better than your team. And a lot of it, there's no substance behind. It is being fed as well, I think, by people like O'Hara, who, let's not beat about the bush. Jamie O'Hara's probably fed a script before that he's going to have to go in there 2-footed on the lad to make him look like a mug. Now, I think he probably went too far, and I suspect there were people at Sky in the background going, geez, Stockport, really? You know, why don't you think about somebody else and actually give it some weight, even if it said about Birmingham last season with the money? But definitely, the majority of English fans, I think, would really welcome it. As I say, a cup game against Rangers for a team like, I don't know, Sunderland or Newcastle United or whatever, they'd love it. I'm sure they would.
Stevie, what about you? We went to Old Trafford in the Europa League last season with a half, I'm just going to say it, a half-fucked team, right? Our team was, we ended up with Bailey Rice on the park and Finlay Curtis towards the end of the game. Like, I'm sorry for swearing, by the way. I know there's different rules and stuff, but and we ran Man U really, really close at Old Trafford. Like, I don't think in a cup tie on a one-off occasion the gap's that big. What do you think about a British Cup?
Oh, I love the idea, mate. Absolutely love it. Just quickly, I think Craig's making a really bold assumption that Jamie O'Hara can actually read a script. Back to your point,
back
to your point, mate. I think I don't know. I would really, I almost wouldn't mind like the Championship, like even like the English Football League, us having like a trophy with them, because I think some of the teams in the Premier League would absolutely destroy a lot of our teams, us included. Look what happened with Liverpool. But yeah, I mean, I get throughout like the 90s, the noughties, even up to, say, last season at Old Trafford, it was a really close game. Rangers, Leeds, even thinking back to Celtic's UEFA Cup run when they beat Liverpool, they beat Blackburn, and there's some absolutely amazing games in my lifetime with Scottish and English clubs. It's a huge thing. But yeah, I wouldn't mind even seeing like I say, even like English Championship, even League One teams. I think that would be quite a big pull. But the Premier League, they wouldn't even entertain it because they've got the Premier League. They don't need any extra games. So I don't think it's really a starter. But I think potentially, maybe go a bit lower down, and it would definitely be a bit more competitive. Somebody there's comments saying there'll never be a British Cup, but you never know. I think it's a great show. I'd love to see it, and I think it would get interest above and below the border. And just quickly, we're talking about the kind of English, like arrogance and bias and stuff. I agree that's in the media, but seeing like personal experience, whenever I've been to England for like work or like social events and stuff, see when you speak to people and I'm a Rangers fan, they're so enthused, like they're actually, great club, like it's really like they get it, and they definitely respect us. So yeah, I think we're quite popular down there.
Mitch, what about you? What's your thoughts?
I think I like the idea of a British Cup idea, like, but I think it would work really nicely on a year that there wasn't a big international tournament or something. That way, like a kind of, or you treat it on
once every 2 years, once every 4 years, something like that. Aye.
And I think, or I mean, you could go even bolder than that when you start looking at some leagues in England, and you look at the Scottish League. Everybody's looking at various ways of making more money for everybody at the moment. That kind of British Super League idea isn't even a bad idea, where you say, well, merge some of the leagues, but then, I don't want Greenpeace shooting me or anything like that, for suggesting increased travel and, all the rest of it. I'm not having Greta coming swinging through the laptop at me. Like, but I think genuinely something like that, there must be an appetite for it, because I think there's also a huge part of the English would be terrified to do that, because everything that they said that they would do is they would get found out that they couldn't do it is. Because you look at, even if you take Celtic and Rangers and you park them over here for a minute, and then you start to look at Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen, they're quite big stadiums. They're bigger than most. They're certainly bigger than most League One stadiums, minus the teams that have obviously fallen in hard times and went down the way. But you'd also argue that their stadiums wouldn't look out of place in the Championship, because all three stadiums are. I think Aberdeen's capacity is about 15,000, if I'm right. Might be a wee bit more than that, but Hibs and Hearts are both around that 18,000, 20,000 mark as well. They don't look out of place when you put them against their English. English Premier League, absolutely they look out of place. English Championship and League One, I think those clubs would make those, like the English clubs, look small in comparison, especially with the fan bases that travel with them week in, week out.
Definitely. Back to the spending power that they've got down south. Stevie S is Birmingham last season, when it splashed out 31.1 million, which is just
insane.
8 million less than Celtic. The big signing was Stansfield for Fulham. This is an example of this wasn't TV money. This is a big takeover that Birmingham have had. What's your thoughts on that now? If O'Hara had come away with Birmingham from last season to win the league, then I think he's got a bit more argument than Stockport. That's no disrespect. That's no disrespect to Stockport, but Birmingham spent to win that league last season to me.
Yeah. And Birmingham are they're a big club. Actually quite like Birmingham, to be fair. Barry Ferguson down there, he's absolutely loved and adored. I think he was there, I think we all followed them. That League Cup final when they beat Arsenal and Barry's running past, I think it's Koscielny, and he smacks him and he's like, God, Barry Ferguson's never changes. So I've got a soft spot for them. But yeah, they're a bigger club than Stockport, obviously. But I think as well, part of the fact that they spent so much money was because the takeover was like the year before, and then they got relegated with Rooney. So they had to come back up. There was no ifs, buts, or maybes. You couldn't be like, some teams that dropped into the third tier, even Leeds, Craig. You were doing the third tier for quite a while. Sunderland, it's a really difficult division to get out. And once you're stuck there, it seems to get more and more difficult. So for them, they had to get up first time at asking, and they made sure it by spending that outlay. And now obviously they're finding it a bit more difficult in the Championship. But that's a quality team. And even the guys who've signed this season, they're improving all the time. But that's the English pyramid. It's like if you get your structure right and you invest, you can really fly. Like, look at Ipswich as well. Even if you'd mentioned Ipswich, that would have been a far better suggestion. The way they've progressed and developed a lot of their players and sold them. If you're well run in England, it can really go like spectacularly well. But I think Birmingham are obviously a far better example than Stockport.
Mitch, what about you? What's your thoughts?
There's a couple of things when you look at Birmingham spending last season that needs to be taken into context of things as well. Birmingham were able to spend what they spent last season because in League One they weren't bound by PSR like everybody else was at the time. So Birmingham knew exactly what they were doing when they spent the way that they did, because they went, okay, so we'll go and grab Stansfield now, we'll go and grab, and as you say, Stansfield's the standout signing. But you look at the rest of the deals, so you put Stansfield again in box A, you pop him in the corner, you take 15 million off it, their spend was comparable to yours. And then you start looking at it and you go, we've spent similar money, again, taking Stansfield out of the equation, and arguably get better value for what we spent. And it just shows you that English clubs aren't particularly very good at spending money because they're probably too used to having too much money.
Aye, definitely. Craig?
Yep. What, just in terms of like the Birmingham example?
Aye, mate.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. And Mitch makes a really good point that they weren't bound by PSR. A little thing that I could throw in, actually, that'll give us a little bit of hope is that you remember their American owners came in and made an almighty mess of appointing a manager when they had one in place who was actually quite good. I think it was Eustace was the manager, and had them sick. They brought in Rooney because he was a name and one they wanted, got relegated. But they put it right, and hopefully with a little bit of time, American owners get these sorts of things correct. But that Birmingham team last year ran away with that league, and I'm not sure whether they ended up with a points record or not. But also that Stansfield transfer, I think it's the second or third highest transfer outside the Premiership in England. I'm not sure there's been more than two that have actually been higher than that. So they are a real outlier on that. The one thing that surprised me really was that they were able to do that and get away with it. And sometimes when you move up, the chickens come home to roost on you. You can take advantage of that loophole, but they seem to have got away with it and done it. But revenue-wise, if we were in the same league as them and getting the same money from the TV, over time, the gates would drown theirs because their stadium holds, 25,000 maybe? And so, you've got to take that into account as well, is that everything in England is skewed by that TV cash, which isn't great outside the Premiership, but that's the prize that's there, and it's a good thing to speculate to accumulate for. So, I think we're not going to see another Birmingham in that league for quite a while. So I don't think we can see that and go, well, League One, it would have helped Jamie O'Hara last week or whenever it was that he said it. But they're not typical League One at all, nowhere near us.
Aye, definitely, mate, 100%. I started this comment for Alistair Johnson. He says the funniest, he's came on the pod and he says a Newcastle fan. He says the funniest thing is we are upset that Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, that Newcastle United cannot spend more money than them, even though Newcastle is owned by Saudi, they're the richest club in the world. But we cannot spend the same money as the London teams and the Manchester teams. To me, that just shows you the spending power and the level that they're at, that they can't, that they've already outspent themselves, if that makes any, they get 100 million a season, the income they've already overspent that, and they need to watch what they're doing. Just shows you the actual firepower when it comes to finances that they've got.
But it's definitely the English pyramid. Sorry, the Premier League.
Stevie, you go first, mate.
Sorry, mate. I was going to say it's so focused on the teams at the top Like Newcastle have been forced to sell Elliot Anderson, for like 30 million, and now he's going to be worth over 100 million. That's completely unfair. I mean, it's even harder for the teams that come up. But I think that's ultimately what they're trying to do. They're almost trying to get like an NFL style thing, where it's basically teams are so protected. So hopefully PSR's done away with, because I don't think it's good for the game.
Mitch?
There's a couple of things when it comes to English football. See, right now in Scotland, right, if the Sky deal fell on its backside tomorrow, most clubs in Scotland could still be relatively self-sufficient because of how little money we get from the TV deals. Now, I'm not saying that there wouldn't be. I'm not saying there's clubs out there that wouldn't struggle, because it's still a couple of £1 million a season. But that couple of £1 million a season pretty much only covers for some of the running costs for most clubs. In England, if the deal fell out of the sky, if the Sky deal fell on its backside tomorrow, there's a whole heap of clubs down there that would be in a whole big of a mess. And again, it's because of that over-reliance on TV money. And I think that's what would be quite interesting to see. And even if we say, when you look at the TV money debate, don't give Rangers and Celtic the full booner that everybody gets in the Premier League, right? Give us half of what those clubs get. Watch what sort of players and transfers that either side of the divide, and Hearts, for example, bring into the debate, because we've been so used to essentially shopping like Oliver Twist in the transfer market. We know where to go and find the better talents. The Premier League, and again, all boils back to that English snobbery, where they go, "What do you mean? There's a lad for Estonia or a lad for Denmark or Sweden? We're not touching him." Very few clubs go and touch those markets that we go and touch, and that's why there's like almost like a 4-tier transfer system. The elite buy from the elite, and then they buy from the clubs, I would say, just under the elite. So they'll go and buy from, using England as an example, they'll go and buy for the likes of Brentford, they'll go to Forest, or teams like that, mid-table, safe clubs. They'll buy from each other that way and keep the money in the house, and let those tier 2 teams come to leagues like ours to go and buy the players. But we've went to the tier 3 teams, like over in Sweden, Norway, the Scandinavians, the Hollands, etc. It's almost like that's where the footballing world in England sees, Scotland as, we are like the breeding ground for players. When actually, if we had better resources from the TV world, you imagine what we could do properly if we were on a pound for pound levels of resources with them. The English clubs don't want to see Scottish clubs with more money, because they know that we can use it better than they will.
Craig, you want to come in and then that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. Just to expand on Mitch's point, Bournemouth, with a stadium that holds 10,000, are one of the top 30 richest clubs in the world at the minute, and they're automatically that because they've been in the Premiership for a while. It's basically the 20 Premiership clubs, and then there's probably about 10 big sustainable clubs around Europe, like Bayern, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Barcelona are in all sorts of financial trouble as well. But you know what I mean? That kind of break that. But it's all about the money. And so, yeah, of course, like Bournemouth couldn't exist on what they're doing on gate receipts alone, unless they had a ground full of billionaires. But that couldn't happen. The other thing is that it isn't sustainable. And PSR is making it worse and making the gap worse, so that people want to go up because they get the money. It's like, great, we get this massive check in our back pockets. But there's a running joke down here for every club that's on the verge of promotion, where they say, could we not just stay down here and win games every week and actually just take the money and not go up? Because going up to the Premiership is absolutely miserable. And okay, Sunderland fans are having a great time at the minute. The only thing they're looking at is getting to 30 as quickly as they can so they can relax. And if they lose every game between now and the end of the season, it won't matter. So the ambition's gone down there as well. There's a lot of comments about how it's sanitised football south of the border. It absolutely has. There's no breaking into that top 6. There's maybe 3 leagues in the Premiership. And really what teams like Brighton, Brentford have done is become expert at being in the middle league with West Ham, whoever. that kind of, and now that's being shaken up a wee bit this year, and it would be quite nice to see the 3 teams that came up stay up, so 3 other teams get bucked off into oblivion, and it just shakes up the whole thing with the money. So there's all sorts of problems, and you could go on about it. It's not a happy ship down in England any more than it is up in Scotland, but it's the cash, and you can't argue with that.
But sorry, do you know what also makes me chuckle a wee bit? Sorry, Stevie, were you coming in there, mate?
On you go.
It does make me chuckle a wee bit. Sorry, Smokes hit the nail on the head in the comments. Scotty, I'm going to add the comment here. The wages in England are so beyond far-fetched. It's unreal. But then you look at the complexities behind it as well, because Nicholas Jackson's a prime example. Obviously, in the summer there, Ed, because of the whole PSR world and how tight the elite Snickers are, obviously, in the PSR world, Bayern couldn't afford to physically buy him, even though they've got the money in the bank to go and buy him. They couldn't pay Chelsea that, I think it was like 70 or 80 million pound Chelsea wanted for him. But they couldn't afford to do it in the summer there. So instead they've had to offset that by loaning him for this season to agree to buy him next season or next week. You start looking at the economics behind that, it's foul. Could you imagine, imagine a world where any SPFL player, like in the next 5 years, even breaks 50 grand a week? Like, if somebody said that a Scottish team signed a player for 50 grand a week, you'd want to go and crack your chairman for giving somebody 50 grand a week.
Tierney's on more than that.
Well, we don't know where that would have, do we?
Tierney's on close to 100. Easy.
Right, well,
Easy.
we'll put him in another wee box, right? Because we're not sure. But for overall, if you imagine if we turned around and signed somebody tomorrow for 55 grand a week, at some point, Stevie's getting us all in the motor to go and batter Kavanagh.
The other thing, if I could just come in on that, is that these teams that are getting big money for, say, Cunha, for example, if they've got him for a song at the start, he'll be on really low wages. And so it gives them the opportunity to go out and maybe spend, say he went for 60 million. If they buy 3 players for 20 million, they're going to have to pay them 5 or 6 times his wages. So suddenly your 60 million isn't 60 million in it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it all shrinks, and everything just favours again those 6 clubs, the ones owned by states and the ones in places like London and what have you, that seem to have like big money behind them. But generally speaking, it's there's no getting into it. The teams that come up have to either spend big and take a risk on players nobody's ever heard of, or they spend small and hope they can sell them on. But nobody's going to buy a £50 million striker outside the top 6 clubs.
Stevie, you want to come in?
I mean, just I know it's not Q&A, but Great Wall in the comments was saying that the English game is going to collapse. It's not. Every time they do a new TV deal, the money goes up. That it's going to keep going. And just something we've not mentioned yet, like part I really love about the Championship in England, no VAR. A goal's a goal. You can run off and celebrate it. It's almost like you watch a game and it's refreshing. It's almost like what football used to be and what it should be. I'm not saying I want it scrapped, VAR in Scotland, but it's one of the big plus points for me. You watch their game and it's just like it's pure football. There's no waiting about for 3 or 4 minutes on a decision. That's a real plus point for me for their game.
From being in games last year, a lot of games last year, exactly, Stevie, 100%. And now suddenly this year, it's like, right, well, we've got, check the watch, we've got 3 minutes to wait to see whether or not they can find something wrong with this.
Anyway, just on to the kind of the last year. I was going to speak about Wrexham, but there's not really much point because Wrexham didn't really spend big last season on they only spent kind of $1.5 million compared to the other side of the divide. We should have asked Doug to pull up the kind of the money when they were in the National Football League. We would have probably got a better kind of reflection of where Wrexham were at that time. But we all know that they've got it. and they will spend it when they got to the Premier League. Mitch, just a kind of any closing thoughts? And were you watching the game last night? Were you happy Scotland are going to the World Cup?
Mate, absolutely delighted, mate. You know what I mean? Like, I look at it, especially for the likes of like our kids and stuff like that. Like, you know, the last time we watched us at a World Cup, I was 8. Like, sorry, Stevie. You know, I was just a bairn when we were last in a World Cup. And I look at it and I go now. I look at, you know, in my wee girl's case, like she's now seen us at a Euros and a World Cup. You know, that's something that we had to wait all the way through adulthood, pretty much. You know, to go and see us go into 2 major tournaments back to back. And there's some of those players as well, like, you know, they've bust a hump through some, let's be honest, some gritty years before even the last Euro qualification. There's been some right ugly right ugly national teams that we've had to beg, steal and borrow players from and kind of Oliver twist our way through it. And you'll go, players like Andy Robertson, this was the final swan song. Like, he wasn't getting another World Cup realistically at his age. And you go, guys like him, Kenny McLean, you go, you boys that deserve it. You know, you burst a hump through the barren years to help get us through into I hate the expression golden generation, but this kind of feels like we're in that jet stream of a gold generation right now. And you're like, long may it continue. But in short, Jamie O'Hara's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the English Championship teams can all go to hell.
Fair enough. Craig, how did I got on over international break, mate?
We did all right. We did all right for 91 minutes in Slovakia. We were drawing 0 each and then conceded a goal and had a man sent off. So, but we're in the playoffs. We're waiting tomorrow to see if we've got Ukraine. It's Ukraine, Turkey, Italy, or Denmark. So a chance of a trip either to Copenhagen, or it seems that Ukraine will be playing in Poland, which would be the dream ticket, really, because, you know, you don't have an away game and you're in flipping Poland for 3 days with the price of beer there. It'd be great. So I can't see us getting there, but, you know, we're still in there fighting anyway.
Oh, good stuff, mate. Any closing thoughts on it, pod?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's... I think that Friday thing that Jamie O'Hara turned up on, and Bothroyd's on it, or Boothroyd's on it sometimes, whatever, they're almost being paid to be controversial. And if that lad from Celtic had gone on there and said, "I think Stockport would win the Scottish Premiership," I think Jamie O'Hara would have argued with him that they wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? I just think, unfortunately, that seems to get them the clicks. So that's what it is. But it's a good one to debate, and it's a good one to put to bed. But I think we can all agree on that.
Aye, definitely, mate. Definitely. Stevie, any closing thoughts? And what's your thoughts on the game last night?
Yeah, I guess last time the Scotland World Cup I was skinny. Sorry much, but
so was I, mate.
It was an amazing. It was the goals. Like, I can't remember seeing a Scotland game where the goals were that good. I mean, McTominay. I think Great Wall in the comments there saying McTominay's the best Scottish midfielder in generations, and I think he's a really special. I mean, obviously a special player, but he's the man for the moments. I think back to his goal against. Remember his free kick against Spain that got ruled out a couple of years ago for God knows what reason. The guy scores spectacular goals, and that last night, you could argue it wasn't even the best goal of the night, which is quite incredible. But yeah, it's similar to match. It's like great for our kids to see, you know, Scotland at a World Cup. So I was delighted with that. I'd still rather not have Steve Clarke as a manager. Honestly, I'd rather have like Derek McInnes in there part time. But maybe he's starting to learn. Maybe he's going to go for it a bit more. We can only hope. And closing thoughts, exactly the same at the start of this pod. Jamie O'Hara isn't irrelevant, and anything he says should be ignored.
Fair enough. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me tonight. It's been a lively chat, and I think we tackled it fairly well. I think we offered solutions. I think we've dived into it with evidence. We've looked at it with a balanced kind of thought process, and just thank you for coming on. Thank you to everybody in the comments. Wouldn't be here if it wasn't Figgies. please smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. It's free. This was brought to you by the Bluebells Bar in Porta del Carmen. Head on over, like their Facebook page. It's the only bar in Porta del Carmen that you can go and watch Rangers games. They've got Scotland games on too. Most fitba, actually. Good food, good drink. They've got hundreds of nights on throughout the week. Head on over and see Kenny. It's a good night. You don't leave sober, trust me, I've been there. Apart from that, just one thing left to say every night is Rangers Journal night. Good night.